Good afternoon to all you listeners out there of the Millionaire by Morning Show. I would like to share with you today Mr. Benjamin Kintisch. Did I say that
Kintisch.
right? Kintisch.
It rhymes with mintish or flintish.
Kintisch.
There you
Make
go.
sure.
Beautiful. Well done. Rashad Thirlkill.
So we're going to be speaking about the new musical comedy, Life Review, the Hospice Musical.
You got it.
We're going to talk a little bit about the whole entire creative process, about anyone listening, following your dreams, and the entrepreneurial aspect of Benjamin being his own producer.
That's right.
Welcome to the show, Benjamin. Let's get
Thanks,
it started.
Rashad. I'm so glad to be here. I love your energy, and I can't wait to keep it going through our conversation today.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. I want to thank you for being on the show. I haven't been able to interview many entertainers, especially comedy, but it's one of my favorite genres. So I would definitely like to keep the energy going. Hop right
Okay, and
into
I'll try to be entertaining, man. I hope I make you laugh more than cry. So let's go.
Not a problem, man. Let's get into Life Review, the Hospice Musical. Matter
Yes.
of fact, let's not get into that. Let's go back. Let's take it back to where the creative process first began and the comedy and everything that Benjamin has to offer to the world start becoming about.
Well, this particular project has a little bit of a backstory. I'll give you the short version. Longer version you can read in detail on the website lifereviewmusical.com. But it began over 10 years ago. I was a beginner chaplain training. A chaplain, by the way, if you're listening, it's like a person of faith, usually clergy, who work with people in distress. That's often in medical settings like nursing homes, hospices, but it could also be a prison chaplain. You can have a chaplain with pro sports. But anyway, you get trained in that role, and my home base, so to speak, was a residential hospice. So the majority of my hours, in addition to this sort of graduate level training about counseling techniques, about how to support people and whatnot, the majority of the time was visits, right? So you go room to room and you learn these techniques, how to be with someone, how to have conversations with people. And yes, these are folks in a hospice dealing with so-called end-of-life care, right? Second definition, and then I'll stop throwing them out. For hospice, if you don't know it, that's usually medical care for people in their last 6 months of life with a focus on pain management and symptoms relief. So you're no longer, quote, battling illness, you're managing symptoms with the expectation that you're close to death. So in that world, a residential hospice, I was doing my training. And the biggest thing that I learned was something called Life Review. Now, this is the technique that I borrowed to name my musical and one of its best songs. But Life Review, Rashad, is a technique you learn. It's basically a structured interview that gets you close to a person's story, what I like to call a highlight reel of their whole life.
Okay.
So this technique is used by chaplains, sometimes social workers or other counselors who work with end-of-life patients, but even elder care patients. I feel like people in any stage of life might benefit from doing Life Review. It's a way to kind of pay attention to the highlights and lowlights of your journey. And I'm doing, for those of you just listening, I'm doing a little up and down with the hand, like a roller coaster. One of the commonalities, that one of the big themes of the play is this idea that we all end up in the hospice, so to speak. Every one of us, whether we're famous or no one's ever heard of us, we all die at the end of our life. And whether we choose hospice care or hospital care, we die at home, the end is the same, right? So our lives can go in many, many different directions. But yet we all end up there. Now, I kind of noticed that as a young chaplain trainee and doing these interviews, I was hearing all these great stories. One night I was driving home, Rashad. I called my wife on the cell phone and I said, I'm hearing these amazing stories. I think they want to be songs. And she just jumped in without skipping a beat. She goes, baby, get writing. So that night I opened up one of those black and white composition books like we used to have in school. And I started scribbling out my first song. It would later become a song that made it to the show over 10 years later, or survived, it's called Will It Still Snow, and it's a ballad, a woman imagining life after her death. That particular song was inspired by a conversation with a real life woman from New England who used to like to ski. And I took a little bit of that as a thumbnail sketch for a character that I would fictionalize. Other characters were composite, some were more directly inspired by people. But the meta structure of the whole play, Rashad, is people's little stories that are kind of amplified or dramatized through the power of music. I tell people it's like Chorus Line meets Fiddler on the Roof. So
Okay.
Chorus Line, if you know that show, it's all of these little monologues that are kind of blown up to be song and dance numbers, one actor at a time. So I use a little bit of that structure. And I say Fiddler on the Roof because my main character, a chaplain who looks and sounds a lot like me, he is kind of a lost boy. His parents have died, so he's got his own grief stuff, and he has faith issues. I don't know how often you go to your house of prayer, whatever faith tradition you belong to, but perhaps this resonates with you. A lot of people have faith when they encounter difficult troubles, it can cause a faith crisis, right? Because they're like, I'm a good person. I say my prayers. I go to church or synagogue or mosque. I'm a pious person.
Hmm.
By the way, like the key turn in the play in the first act is when he sort of misuses Job, a famously tricky theological mess of a book. I don't like it. But it's a man of faith who's like cursed by God and the devil in like a bet. It's all like a pretty terrible apocryphal tale in my mind. But my character, the chaplain, quotes Job to a woman whose young adult son is dying. A terrible move, Rashad. You don't want to quote Job to anyone whose kid is dying. It's just like awful. Um, but the humor in that awkward scene is like sometimes clergy really step in it when they're trying to be wise in a moment that would best be served by them being quiet. So chaplains, it turns out, we go to great lengths to train to learn how to be quiet despite our eminent wisdom. And our character, the chaplain, he has to learn that lesson. And then he kind of pivots to asking questions with the Big Song Life Review. And then what unfolds in the next 2/3 of the play are the answers, the stories that the patients share. So there you go.
Okay. Okay, man. That sounds entertaining. I I don't I'm imagining you or anyone else being in hospice and creating something out of it that's upbeat comedy. I think that's talent. That's definitely a show of talent, just because of what it encompasses.
I appreciate you saying that, Rashad. A lot of people tell me when they hear about my play and the conceit of it, a musical comedy set in a hospice, either they do the cringe face, like they ate something sour, or they laugh nervously. And if they laugh, I say, that's right, it's very funny. And if they cringe, I say, that's right, it's awkward. But spoiler alert, and then I start breaking into song from the opening number, where I tell them everybody dies in the end. And like we kind of laugh throughout uh the whole process. I also like to quote the wise Mary Poppins, who teaches, takes a spoonful of sugar to get the medicine go down, or let the medicine go down. Um, so the medicine in my play is we're all going to die in the end, our loved ones are going to die. Um, and also we all have stories to tell and share. That's sort of the uplifting part. The
Yeah,
difficult part is our shared mortality, and we laugh with that even as we wrestle with it. But I feel like the uplifting part is the power of visitation, the power of listening, the power of story sharing and storytelling. And that's what I'm so excited to bring to the musical stage.
that's cool, man. So you're traveling with this? You're traveling
Great
with this
question.
show?
So right now, I have created a full-length musical with 16 songs and dialogue. That script exists along with all of the songs and the piano scores. I'm looking for a theatrical partner in the United States or abroad to help stand it up. Ideally, a college program or a small community or regional theater. So if you're listening and you love theater and you're involved with a local institution, look me up on Instagram or my website. I'd love to talk about partnering. The less ambitious goal in the short term, that's much easier, Rashad. I have a one-man version of the show that is condensed. This actually came sort of a silver lining from the COVID cloud. I had the full-length show. When you go to the website and you see this great trailer video, folks, all that footage comes from right before COVID. When COVID shut everything down, I was real stuck. And with the help of a coach who suggested I pivoted, I took the 16-song show and smushed it down, made it a cabaret show of 8 songs with narration, and I literally performed it in this space over a dozen times for performances around the United States, and I even had my international premiere. I played it in London virtually during COVID, and I was like, that's fun. Like it was a
Yeah.
crazy pivot and challenging as a performer. I'll tell you folks, when you see someone's doing a one-man show, that is a heavy lift. Love or hate it, one person without any breaks, it's exhausting. So my song and dance thing for 45 minutes, even though it's quote just in this room, when it was done, I would like sit down,
I
catch my
bet.
breath.
I
But it's
bet,
super,
man.
despite the exhaustion, I got to tell you, it's a labor of love. And what's really fun, Rashad, is with this one-man show, I can be super nimble. I'm able to travel anywhere in the country or the world by myself to appear. I brought the one-man show live last spring to Asheville Fringe Festival, and I'm about to submit my application for the local capital city Fringe. That's Washington, D.C. Yeah, one-man shows work well in the Fringe festival world because they have small stages and
Hmm.
they want shows that are less than an hour. My full-length show doesn't fit in a Fringe festival because it's too long and honestly a little clunky for a tiny stage. But there's sort of different ways to spread the music. I mean, just about a month ago, Rashad, I had a house concert here in suburban DC, in Maryland, and there were like 30 people there. We more than covered our costs, and had a live piano player. I sang all the songs and did the thing. People were really moved, and I was very happy to share it. It was my first appearance locally since COVID.
Okay.
Um, and so that felt good to do that and invite certain friends, a producer partner locally to help or, to see it and kind of reignite her interest in the project. So that's been cool. So if you're listening and you're curious about the project, get in touch again. Super active on Instagram, and we have a contact us form via the website. That's lifereviewmusical.com. And I'd love to hear from your listeners or your viewers, Rashad. If this play interests you and you want to help grow it, connect me with you or someone you know, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I would like to see you expand this. You actually, one thing about a one-man show is you can depend on yourself. And
That's true. That's true. Sometimes I
so,
want to fire myself, but most of the time I'm a pretty good employee.
right, yeah,
Yes, when you have a cast of 8 or more, it is a little bit like herding cats. With respect to the cats out there who are listening.
I know it. I know it. I've been a part of a few different groups and teams and whatnot, and you do have to depend on others. As
Yeah.
far as writers and everything, do you have partners with that, or are you writing and performing,
For the
marketing and
creative
everything yourself?
process. Yeah, so great question. So, um, I came up with the concept and I wrote the lyrics for all of the songs, and I was the original playwright. I worked with a team of 2 primary composers, Jason Spiewak of New Jersey and Michael Miller of New York. They wrote the music for, I want to say, 13 of the 16 songs. I wrote the music for 1, and then I got 1 each from Miriam Cook and Andy Basov, who also both helped with some arranging work. Additionally, the script at one point got a helpful boost from Beth Broadway, and that is her actual name. She's a writer out of Seattle. um, So it's been quite a big team, and we have like headshots and bios of most of the principal members of our creative team on that website, Life Review Musical, so you can learn more about them. I've been really grateful for finding these talented partners. I mean, Jason, the original co-writer, I mean, he I'm sighing Rashad because when I partnered with him, it felt a little bit like a who me kind of moment. He's a professional level piano player who works in the music business in New York City. He manages artists. He's not a corporate label, but he's an indie label and he makes a living. So, like, he really knows what he's doing and he gets to vote for the Grammys because he's appeared on studio recordings. So, like, super impressive dude. And he was also just like a fellow dad at the preschool dropping off his kids. And like we were in the bowling league together or something. So we were friendly before we collaborators, which helped me get the nerve up to say, hey, I've got this project. Can we talk about it? We ended up meeting at his house. He poured some nice bourbon. I pitched him the idea and he kind of laughed about it. And he's like, I like it. I think there's something there. I'll co-write with you. And so that was like a big first early win. He also like had the idea right from the beginning that we needed a funny opening number, which we got to work on right away, you know, kind of break the ice. People are nervous. It's a play about dying. Uh-oh. So, actually just this morning, I'm proud to say, Rashad, I submitted the song, the opening number for a local cabaret show that's focusing on comedy numbers. I'm saying I'm proud because I don't think I've done enough. I've done a ton of podcasts recently. Like, if any of you listening are enjoying me and you Google my name, I've done like, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 appearances in the last 20 years, I'm estimating. It's kind of bananas. But one thing I haven't done too much is sharing my songs deliberately. So I'm very proud of this because like it's an audition. I had to do a video. So I got my 13-year-old daughter doing video and but the funny number is a comedy song. It's called Spoiler Alert. I've now referenced it twice. Rashad, do you want me to break into song on your podcast? Is that something we do here? I don't know.
Hey, go right ahead.
All right.
Give
Here
us.
we go. I'll give you the first minute. Friends,
All right.
presenting the opening number from Life Review, the Hospice Musical. Lyrics by Ben Kintisch, music by Andy Basov. We don't mean to be a bummer, but we've got some awful news. It gets colder after summer, and even winners lose. Robert Frost composed on one fine day in a most poetic way. He wrote nothing gold can stay. That's what he said, and now he's dead because, spoiler alert, do, everybody dies in the end. Sorry to ruin the play, my friend. Love 'em or hate 'em, this cannot bend. Everybody dies in the end. And I'll leave it there for now. Gotta leave the folks wanting more.
Okay. Spoiler alert.
So,
Everyone dies in
friends,
the end.
but that is it's a funny punchline because here's where I ruined the joke, Rashad, because I'm gonna explain it. Man, it's funny because 3/4 of the characters in a hospice musical are dead by curtain at the end of Act 2, because you know, hospice patients, they're dying every day. And big picture, everyone in the house on both sides of that curtain, we all die in the end. And that's the conceit of that opening song, because I go on to say, I list all kinds of people, the lowliest pauper, the loftiest king, you know, whether you're married or you got no ring, we all gotta die. And it's like, it's delivered with that vaudeville, the jazz hands, the kind of affectation to lean into the silliness of it. But of course, the dark message, dark or maybe just like real, depending on how you swallow that, is our shared mortality. And that's part of what I play with throughout the musical, right? As I like to explain it, hospice is a place that some might view as full of death or morbidity or, I don't know, dark stuff. To me, it was always a place filled with life and unintentional comedy. and a surprising amount of flirtation and sexual tension, and some nostalgia and a whole lot of stories, and like very sincere family reunions. Like we had common spaces that were available to visitors and staff alike, and people this may sound crass, so I'm going to try to say it artfully. Residents in a residential hospice have different durations of stay, right? Some people arrive and they're dead within a few days. Some people can last for 6 months or more, and then they need to be recertified as hospice. Patients stay longer, which means some people will celebrate a birthday or an anniversary along the way, or Christmas is a big day in hospice, or Easter, Passover if you're Jewish, Hanukkah if you're Jewish, right? So I celebrated those holidays in the real life version of this play. I celebrated those holidays with patients of all faith traditions. And I ministered, so to speak, in my role as chaplain to people of all faith traditions, celebrating holidays, celebrating life cycle things, anniversaries, birthdays, whatever. And some of it was like secular holidays, like opening day for all of you baseball nuts. That is a holiday. Or I guess for accountants, April 15th is a holiday that you want to commemorate somehow. But whatever it is, there was a lot of celebration despite the reality of death being afoot, or like, part of the situation. I have a funny one-liner in the play early on where the chaplain expresses his anxiety to his colleague, the nurse, our voice of wisdom, and he goes, I'm nervous. There's just so much dying, and she goes, "That's what the people come here to do." Like, it's like
that's what they're here for.
That's what they're here for. Exactly. They're getting exactly what they signed up for if they die. I've laughed with nurses about this. Again, this is a little bit of the gallows humor that is a subtext for much of the comedy in the show. Like, the people are here for that. And, I remember talking with one nurse when I was doing my training. And I asked her, like, how long have you been a hospice nurse? It's got to be tough. She's like, it's tough, but I like it a lot because I get to spend time with my patients and I get to spend a lot of time with the loved ones. She said, I used to be an ER nurse and you don't get to spend a lot of time with family.
Yeah.
It's like triage.
Right.
So you couldn't think of she described hospice as like the antithesis of ER. Because ER is all about aggressive interventions, save the patient at all costs. Hospice is about accepting the prognosis,
right,
and then alleviating pain and suffering. In that fictional version of hospice in the play, I try not to get too heavy into the medical details, but really focus on the stories and those moments of humanity and sharing that illuminate the songs.
I can't help but to think as a marketer. That's just, my that's just what I do. But
Let's talk, Rashad.
I just think that you have something here.
I'll
You
take
definitely
it.
have something here because you have really set the cup to half full instead of half empty.
Okay.
If you can spread that message, I believe I don't know, people that's in hospice.
Sure.
In any type of way, even hospice companies, even hospice places. Like, this play is a spokesperson for that. Does that make sense?
Listen, there will be opportunities for me to grow this thing that will require some additional investment. Right now, I'd love to have an album done of our songs. I'd love to have bop, 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 right? And that's going to take some investment. I would be happy to partner with the right group to be the producer for the next level of this thing as it grows. And, I actually have a funny version of this early on. I was scribbling in one of my books, aforementioned journal books, right? And I just wrote real big, Kleenex, corporate sponsor of Life Review, the Hospice Musical. This is right after I'd written another very sad song. Apparently one of my superpowers, Rashad, is making people cry with my lyrics. So There you go.
Oh, okay. So now on top of comedy, I guess you can also add drama,
Oh, well, sure, man.
dramedy.
That's the medicine that's got to go down. It's all the pain of it. I mean,
Yeah.
listen, it's I like to tell people that death is difficult, but it gives our life meaning. And when we're crying and when we're hurting, this is not an original thought. This is attributed to a teacher, um, a priest whose name escapes me right now. I want to say Father James. That sounds plausible. A lot of priests were James or Jimmy's. Anyway, we'll say he was Father James, hospice fame, and he taught the tears are love. The tears are love. He taught a whole homily about this. The idea being that if you tune on the news and you hear about a terrible car crash, if it's not your neighborhood and you don't know the people who got killed, you won't cry.
Mhm.
You might say something like, "That's a shame," but you won't cry. But if you get that terrible, dreaded phone call about anyone in your family dying, God forbid, in a car crash, the tears will come
Mhm.
because there's love.
Right.
So when we experience loss and tears come, it's a signal that we loved the person, or sometimes we cry or we grieve about experiences. I like to remind people when you lose a beloved job, if you're proud of like a business owner and your dream takes off and then it sputters and it fails, you can grieve your business or your entrepreneurial dream, right? There's so much pain there. um so part of the message of my play, I hope, is to normalize grief in all of the ways we experience it. Our hero, the chaplain, is dealing with his own private grief. His parents are both deceased, and in the opening scene he's on his knees planting daffodils in memory of his mother. In the final scene of the play, the daffodils are blooming, a symbol of hope. We're not convinced that he's, quote, all the way better from his grief, but he's off of his knees. He's standing up now, and you can see that he's on his way forward. So I would say, if you're listening to me today, even if you don't care about musical theater, but you're just dealing with some grief stuff, I would remind you that despite what you might have heard about stages of grief, that's just kind of a categorization. But there is nothing that is linear about grief. I like to describe it as walking a path that is never straight or direct. It's a little bit zigzag. It might even have some switchbacks where you're feeling better, then you're feeling worse. Um, Sometimes when you grieve a loved one, you go to a place that you used to enjoy with the person, and that sets off like a grief spiral that you didn't even know you had access to. And that can even happen months or years later. When you think about old friends, say from the old neighborhood where you grew up, and you go back home for grandma or Thanksgiving, and then like you don't even expect to deal with your old buddy, but like, like sometimes just being in the place or having that association. And I mean, I mentioned grandma, but like in my family, my parents are now the elderly generation. But I have associations with certain holidays and certain places about the older generation now long deceased. Um, so while I don't specifically go home and think about all the dead grandparents, like their ghosts kind of linger around my parents' house. Not in a bad way, but it's like kind of interesting to notice. Um, anyway, this is all to say that when we have our grief, whether it's close, like a recent death, or far away, like the ghost of my grandfather, dead now since I was 13 years old, like 30 years or something, um, they still kind of inform our experience living in the present. So I think acknowledging that is healthy. We try to do that in the play, kind of name our grief and walk through it, talk through it. And then sharing those stories, whether the person is living or long gone. I feel like sharing stories is so healthy and so therapeutic, helps us walk through the grief and helps us honor the memory of the person.
I think that's very important. What you're doing, what you're speaking on, and how you're bringing it to the forefront based on death and based on grief. very important because people don't know how to do that or deal with that. And you're doing it in an entertaining way as well. So that's very special, I must say, Ben.
Thanks, Rashad. I appreciate that.
Find Ben on lifereviewmusical.com. We would like to get people that's interested in not only seeing the play, we would like to get more reviews. Am I correct about that?
I mean, if you're interested, send me a message. Yeah, be in touch. Connect me with people. Right now, I'm all to use that botanical metaphor. You heard that planting daffodils is a key metaphor. By the way, if you look at the website, you'll see daffodils is all over it.
Okay.
It's on my Instagram. That's our logo. And you know, there's one more thing about that daffodil metaphor. It comes back year after year. In the Jewish tradition, we memorialize our dead on an anniversary fashion. A lot of people of whatever faith tradition like to remember anniversaries of birth and deaths. And the daffodil will bloom every spring, no matter what, and kind of remind us that there's hope to be found. So in that spirit, check out the website. There's a great trailer video there where you see a bunch of our songs and some live footage. That's lifereviewmusical.com. I'm super active on Instagram at lifereviewmusical, where you'll see videos and photos and ruminations. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you folks. And I think if you like hearing me yammer away, I've done a ton of podcasts recently. I haven't uploaded all of them to the website, so I'm like a couple years behind on uploading content. So if you just Google Benjamin Kintisch Life Review podcast, you get like, oh my God, it's like 20 appearances now in the last couple of years. It's bananas. It's been a lot of fun. So you can find lots of great conversations, or even like on your favorite podcast app. One recent favorite was Today We Laughed and Learned, where I had a lot of good laughter there. But lots of pod appearances where you can hear me talking about the project and different aspects of it. And Rashad, it's been such a great conversation with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Not a problem at all, man. You brought a lot of life to the podcast.
Now, I know that I've already talked for a lot of time. I don't know if you're the kind of person who likes to talk more and cut down, or if you need to end gracefully already. We haven't talked about the entrepreneurship of producing a play, but I don't know if we're already over. So I'll follow your lead, my friend. What do you
Okay.
think?
Well, I have to wrap up because these are back to back to back today. I don't
So then
know.
I will not push additional words in this show. However, if you're trying to get your dream going, share it with people, share it with people, share it with people. That's my message for you. You can do it, even if it feels daunting.
Thank you for that, Ben. We left on a note that everyone can take with them, everyone that listens to this podcast anyway. And I want to thank you for coming on. And what I will do is circle back around and we'll attempt to get you on to speak about nothing but entrepreneurship. How about that?
I would love that, because all kinds of creative people can relate to the fact they've got something cool, but it costs a few bucks to share it with the world. How do we pay for it? Let's talk.
Let's talk. All right, Ben. You have a great Saturday and the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much, Rashad. God bless all your listeners. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye now.